Hey there everybody, today we're going to be making three things. The first is a pork roulade. The second is I'm going to show you how to make rice with just a pot and some water. And the third is some broccoli, which I'm going to be using some oyster sauce to make. Does the broccoli have any complementary flavor profiles with the oyster sauce to the pork roulade that we're making? No, not really, but it's tasty and I figured I'd show you guys how to make it. For the pork roulade, we're basically just going to need a pork loin, some parsley, some olive oil, some salt, pepper, and some optionals. Broccoli is just going to be broccoli and oyster sauce, and rice is going to be rice and water. I know that one was a big surprise, but yeah, basically that's it.
Okay, the first thing we're going to do is work on the filling for our roulade, and to get started you're going to want to pick your parsley leaves. You don't have to pick every leaf one by one, you can pick them off in their little bunches, but make sure to get most of the stem off of the parsley. As you can see, I ended up with just over 4 cups and my roast was a little bit over 3.5 pounds. I think it was like 3.6, so go for about a cup or a little more of parsley per pound of your roast. Next, what you're going to want to do is give your parsley a gentle dry, and just kidding, you can absolutely squeeze the living heck out of it because we are about to chop it into a million bajillion pieces. It really doesn't matter. To get started chopping, I would recommend trying to pack all your parsley into a ball so it's easier to just chop all of it all at once, and then after that you can go to town, chop however you want. You can chop it vertical, you can chop it horizontal, you can chop it at a diagonal, and if you're really good you can chop it at 4 times speed with a little bit of editing magic. Also, disclaimer, you can totally use a food processor. I just don't have a great one, so I chopped it by hand. Once you're done chopping up your parsley, just put it into your container of choice, and the next step is to put in enough olive oil just to about cover the top of the parsley. Once you got all of your olive oil in there, you can start adding your seasonings. I started with a whole lot of freshly ground black pepper and about 3¼ teaspoons of salt. I used a little bit less than 1 teaspoon of salt per pound of my roast. That's what I would recommend you guys to do, so just use that as your baseline when you're measuring out your salt. For example, if your roast was about 2 pounds, I'd probably go for about 1¾ teaspoon of salt. After that, it's only the optionals. The only thing extra I put in was a little bit of red chili flake. You can add a few different things for optionals in this recipe, and this is actually based on Joshua Weissman's pork roulade recipe, and he adds a few different things in, so if you want to see what he adds in, go check that out. But for this one, I just wanted to make it really simple, so I'm only adding those chili flakes. Next, go ahead and pat dry your roast, and after that I kind of pointed out a certain section of the roast that I had. That is the part of the roast I would recommend you get if you are buying a smaller roast, just because that fat cap is going to crisp up really nicely, and it's probably the best part of any of the bigger roasts that you can make with this cut. So if you are getting a smaller one, I recommend that portion there. Next, we have to make our pork loin into a pork roulade, which will probably be the toughest looking part of this video, but I promise you it is pretty easy. And to help you guys through the process, because I didn't think I could explain it very well if I was just showing myself cutting into it, I made a little diagram. It doesn't look the best, but I figured it would probably help some of you guys out, so I went ahead and tried. So anyway, here's the diagram, and this is supposed to be the pork looking straight at it if the fat cap is at the bottom of the roast. And next, those numbered red sections are the 4 cuts that you're going to make. So for the first cut, what you're going to want to do is cut down along the side of the roast about an inch away from the edge until you can roll that out. Then for cut 2, what you're going to want to do is cut parallel to your cutting board at about the same thickness that you made that first cut along until you can roll it out. Then for cuts 3 and 4, it's basically the same thing as cut 2, where you're cutting parallel to your cutting board and you're just cutting far enough until you can roll it out again. And once you're done with cut 3 and cut 4, you should end up with something like this. Next, what you're going to want to do is cut your butcher's twine. I needed about 5 strings. It's going to depend on how big your roast is, but just get enough so that you can put butcher's twine in about every 2 inches. And trust me, you're not going to want to save this for later because your hands are going to get a little bit dirty when you're stuffing your roast, so just get that out of the way now and have them somewhere easy to grab for later. Next, spread in the parsley and olive oil mixture onto the inside of that roast, and make sure to leave a little bit left in your container so that you'll be able to get the spots that didn't get enough before, just to make sure it is as even as possible. Then once you got your mix evenly spread on there, it is time to roll up the roast. And you can take your time rolling up your roast, don't worry about it, just try to make sure it is as even as possible when you roll it back up. And once you get your roast all rolled up, get your butcher's twine back and start to tie in even intervals all along your roast. It doesn't matter what type of knot you use to tie up your roast as long as they are secure. And once you finish tying, make sure you cut off the extra parts of those strings so they're not sticking out while we put this in the oven. Next, flip your roast back over so the fat cap is facing up and put it on a baking sheet lined with foil with a rack on top, and put it into your oven that should be preheated to 450. Bake at 450 for 15 minutes and then drop the temperature to 325 and cook for about another 45 minutes.
Okay, our pork is in the oven, so the thing that's going to take the next longest time to cook is going to be the rice. I'm going to get started on that. So I filled the pot about a third, maybe more like a quarter full of rice, which is just about what I want. The rice is going to expand a whole lot in the pot, so you definitely don't want to overfill this. And after you get the amount of rice you want, you're going to want to wash it. And I'm just going to do this by hand, fill it up, mix it, dump it, and I'll get back after I finish rinsing my rice.
So I wasn't originally planning on showing how I wash my rice, but I figured, hey, why not? Maybe there's like one person out there that doesn't know how to do it. So basically what I do is I just fill it up a couple inches above my rice and mix it by hand for about 10 or 15 seconds. And then I just dump the water out, and I do this 2 times. Some people will swear that you have to wash your rice until all the water runs completely clear. I'm not one of those people. I don't really care if there's a little bit of starch left in it, but if you are one of those people, I mean, go ahead, wash your rice as much as you want. I'm not going to stop you, but that's just how much I wash my rice. Next, fill up your pot with enough water so that when you put your finger in to touch the rice, it fills up just enough to touch the top of your first knuckle. Don't ask me why or how this works, all I know is that's the rule and that's what I've been doing since I learned how to cook rice, and that's the rule you should follow too. After that, put your pot on the stove on high and bring it up to a rolling boil, then drop it down to medium high so it's still a rolling boil but it won't boil over. After that, let the rice boil until the water line drops enough so that bubbles are just barely coming through the top of the rice. Then turn the heat down to low and just let it steam for 25 minutes. And when you're done, your rice is all ready to go and it should look something like this. Okay, the last part of this video is going to be the broccoli recipe, which is super easy, so let's get into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is chop up your broccoli, and I like to start off by cutting off the ends because they'll usually get a little bit hard from sitting on the grocery store shelf. Then I will pick off the leaves and I'll start cutting into them. The way I like to chop my broccoli is to cut the stem just below all of the florets so I can start picking those off, and the ones that are a little too big I'll cut in half or maybe even quarters, but the rest I'll just leave as is. Then, because I like to get everything out of the broccoli that I can, I will cut off the skin of the stems so that when I cook they aren't just super hard and super tough to chew through, and I will cut those into bite-sized pieces as well. Then I just repeat with the rest of my broccoli until all of it is nice and prepped. Once all your broccoli is chopped up, you can throw it into a pan with a little bit of olive oil heated to about medium heat. Then just mix it up and let it sit for a few minutes and mix it up again until you start seeing some nice color on your broccoli. Once you got your color, you can start adding your oyster sauce, and I just do a little drizzle and then I will mix it all in, and then I will do another little drizzle after I mix it. Once you got your second coat of oyster sauce in there, just let it sit for a couple minutes, and after that put in about 2 tablespoons of water and cover it with a lid. What this is going to do is steam your broccoli as well as water down the oyster sauce a little bit, which can be kind of strong, and after about 5 minutes the water should reduce enough so that you're left with a thick enough sauce and your broccoli will be perfectly cooked. If your pan's lid doesn't have a hole to let steam through like mine does, just let it sit on the heat after you take off the lid for another couple minutes and you should be good. But anyway, now everything is done, so you can start cutting into your pork. Make sure you cut off the butcher's twine before you dig in. I wouldn't want you to get any bites of that. Anyway, this is a super simple recipe that will make you look like you really know what you're doing when you're cooking, which is a bonus. Plus, pork is usually pretty cheap, so that's just another reason why you guys should try it out. I had to change the lighting and the colors a little bit so you could properly see just how juicy this pork was. It was fantastic. And after you plate up and eat your dinner, any leftover pork makes really good sandwich meat. I highly recommend it.